The golden flames of the teppanyaki grill lick the air like hungry serpents in Le Jardin Secret's most exclusive private dining room, where Seoul's elite gather to feast on more than just food. They devour reputations. Vanessa Holloway's hands move with surgical precision across the heated steel surface. Her pristine white chef's uniform a stark contrast against her golden brown skin that glows under the restaurant's ambient lighting. "Look at her trying to pretend she belongs here," whispers Park Mi-young, the socialite wife of a pharmaceutical magnate, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she gestures dismissively. Does she even know what real Korean cuisine tastes like? Probably learned to cook from some American food truck, adds director Kim's wife, her voice dripping with condescension. "I heard they hired her just for the diversity show." The poisonous words slice through the air while Vanessa continues her artistry, each knife stroke deliberate, each seasoning measured with the confidence of someone who has fought for every opportunity. Her movements tell a story of countless nights perfecting techniques, of rising before dawn to prep vegetables, of bleeding and sweating for a dream that seems perpetually out of reach. From the corner of the table, Lee Min-jun watches with the intensity of a predator, not hunting Vanessa, but cataloging every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every microaggression that his father's business associates think he cannot see. His perfectly tailored Armani suit doesn't move as his jaw tightens, his fingers gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles turn white. Vanessa places the final garnish on the Wagyu beef with a flick of her spatula that transforms the dish into edible sculpture. The silence that follows is electric, charged with the tension of prejudice, meeting undeniable talent. Min-jun takes the first bite, his eyes closing as the flavors explode across his palate. Complex, sophisticated, absolutely masterful. When he stands, the weight of 3 generations of Lee family power fills the room like a storm front. His voice, when it comes, cuts through the air like his grandfather's sword once cut through his business rivals. "You are not even worth the cutting board she used to serve us this masterpiece." The room freezes. 23 pairs of eyes lock onto the billionaire heir who just committed social suicide for a woman they consider beneath their notice. If respect had a price tag, would you be wealthy enough to afford it? Subscribe to never miss stories that challenge everything you thought you knew about power, prejudice, and the courage to stand up for what's right. The aftershock of Min-jun's words ripples through Le Jardin Secret like a stone thrown into still water. Park Mi-young's face cycles through shock, indignation, and calculating fury, while her husband, a man who's built pharmaceutical empires on the backs of political connections, stares at Min-jun as if he's watching a carefully orchestrated business deal explode. Vanessa's hands, still steady despite the chaos erupting around her, clean her knives with mechanical precision. She's learned to armor herself against words like these, to let them bounce off the surface while protecting the vulnerable parts underneath. But something about the way Min-jun stood, not just for her, but against people who represent everything he was born into, makes her chest tighten with an emotion she can't quite name. "Min-juna," Director Kim's voice carries the weight of assumed familiarity, the casual intimacy of men who've made deals in bathhouses and sealed fortunes over soju. "Perhaps the jet lag from your European business trip is affecting your judgment." But Min-jun doesn't retreat. Instead, he moves with the fluid grace that 3 generations of martial arts training and Swiss boarding school deportment lessons have bred into his bones. He approaches Vanessa's station, ignoring the collective intake of breath from the room, and extends his hand. "Lee Min-jun," he says, his English accented but precise. "And you are the chef who just reminded me why I fell in love with cuisine in the first place." Vanessa looks up from her cleaning, meeting eyes that hold no pity, no condescension, no savior complex, Just genuine respect from one professional to another. "Vanessa Holloway," she replies, accepting the handshake. His grip is firm, calloused in unexpected places that speak of someone who doesn't just inherit power, but works to understand it. The handshake lasts exactly 3 seconds too long for polite society, exactly 3 seconds that Park Mi-young will dissect with surgical precision when she calls her closest friends tonight, exactly 3 seconds that will launch 1,000 gossip articles about the Lee heir's scandalous fascination with the foreign chef. "Your knife work," Min-jun continues, seemingly oblivious to the social earthquake he's creating. "Where did you train?" "Le Cordon Bleu, Paris," Vanessa answers, then adds with a slight smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes, "followed by the School of Hard Knocks, everywhere else." A laugh escapes Min-jun. Genuine, delighted, completely at odds with the funeral atmosphere that settled over the dining room. The best education available. From across the room, his phone buzzes with a text from his father's assistant. "Dinner. Tomorrow. 7 p.m. Important matters to discuss regarding your public behavior." Min-jun glances at the message, deletes it without responding, and looks back at Vanessa. "I'd like to discuss a business proposition with you," he says, pulling a business card from his jacket with movements so smooth they could be choreographed. "Something tells me you're exactly what my new restaurant venture has been missing." As Vanessa takes the card, their fingers brush again. This time, the contact sends electricity up her arm that has nothing to do with static and everything to do with the way he's looking at her. Not as a charity case, not as a diversity hire, but as someone whose talent he recognizes and respects. The card is heavy stock, minimalist design, expensive enough to feed a family of 4 for a week. Lee Min-jun, CEO, Horizon Ventures. "What kind of restaurant?" she asks, professional curiosity overriding the voice in her head that's screaming about playing with fire. "The kind that serves the best food in Seoul," Min-jun replies, regardless of who cooks it. Behind him, Park Mi-young has recovered enough to begin whispering furiously into her phone, no doubt alerting every gossip columnist in the city that Lee Min-jun has lost his mind. Director Kim is calculating the political ramifications of being associated with whatever scandal this might become. His wife is already planning how to spin this story to their advantage. But Vanessa only sees Min-jun, standing in a room full of his father's associates, choosing her dignity over their approval. What happens when someone sees your worth before you fully believe in it yourself? 3 days after the Le Jardin secret incident, Vanessa stands in the cramped kitchen of Myeongdong Grill, the mid-tier restaurant where she's been working for 18 months, prepping vegetables for the lunch rush. The gossip articles have found her, of course. Korean media moves faster than a brush fire when it involves the Lee family. Mystery chef catches heir's eye. And who is the foreign woman making waves in high society? Pepper the internet, complete with grainy photos of her walking to work. Her hands work automatically. Julienne the carrots, Brunoise the onions, precisely uniform cuts that would make her Culinary Institute instructors proud. But her mind is elsewhere, turning over Min-jun's proposition like a wine she's trying to identify by taste alone. Sophie Kim emerges from the restaurant's tiny office, her expression unreadable. At 35, Sophie owns Myeongdong Grill and has survived in Seoul's brutal culinary scene through a combination of talent, ruthlessness, and the kind of strategic thinking that would make Sun Tzu proud. She's been Vanessa's mentor, her chance taker, the woman who hired a Black American chef when every other restaurant owner in the district was too concerned about their clientele's comfort levels. "We need to talk," Sophie says, pouring herself coffee from the pot that's been brewing since 5 a.m. Her movements are precise, economical. Everything about Sophie speaks of energy conservation, of someone who's learned to pick her battles carefully. Vanessa's knife stills mid-chop. If this is about the articles, this is about Lee Min-jun calling me personally. Sophie interrupts, settling onto the stool beside Vanessa's prep station. This is about him offering to buy out your contract for triple what most restaurants make in a month. The carrot pieces scatter across the cutting board as Vanessa's hand jerks. He what? Offered me 200 million won to release you immediately, with a letter of recommendation so glowing it could power half of Gangnam. Sophie's voice is carefully neutral, but Vanessa can read the subtext in her posture, the way her shoulders have gone rigid with the effort of not showing how much this offer means to a woman who spent 15 years clawing her way to restaurant ownership. And? Vanessa asks, though she's not sure she wants to hear the answer. And I told him that you're not for sale, Sophie replies, taking a sip of coffee that's probably strong enough to wake the dead. But that if he wants to make you an offer directly, I won't stand in your way. Relief floods Vanessa's chest, followed immediately by confusion. Why? Sophie stands, smoothing down her chef's coat, with hands that have been burned by hot pans, and criticism in equal measure. Because 18 months ago, I took a chance on you when nobody else would. Not because I'm a saint, but because I recognized something in you that reminded me of myself at your age. Hungry, talented, and tired of being underestimated. She pauses, looking out the kitchen's small window toward the street where Seoul's lunch crowd is beginning to gather. But also because Lee Min-jun didn't call asking about the foreign chef or the black woman who's been in the news. He called asking about Vanessa Holloway, the chef who made the best Wagyu he's ever tasted, who trained at Le Cordon Bleu, who has James Beard Award ambitions written all over her knife skills. The words hit Vanessa like a physical blow, not painful, but stunning in their accuracy. How did Min-jun see so clearly what others choose to ignore? There's something else, Sophie continues, pulling a sealed envelope from her apron pocket. This came by courier this morning. Addressed to you, sent from Horizon Ventures. Vanessa takes the envelope with hands that are steadier than she feels. The paper is the same expensive stock as Min-jun's business card, cream-colored and heavy with promise. Inside, she finds a formal letter written in English, the script precise and somehow masculine. Ms. Holloway, I would like to formally invite you to discuss a head chef position at a new restaurant I'm developing in Itaewon. The concept revolves around fusion cuisine that respects traditional techniques while pushing boundaries. I believe your background makes you uniquely qualified to lead this vision. The position offers complete creative control over menu development, a competitive salary that reflects your worth rather than market prejudices, and the opportunity to establish yourself as one of Seoul's premier culinary talents. If you're interested, please join me for dinner tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Address enclosed. Come hungry. I'll be cooking. Respectfully, Lee Min-jun. Vanessa reads the letter twice, then looks up to find Sophie watching her with an expression that's part pride, part concern, and entirely understanding. He's cooking? Sophie asks. Apparently. Rich boys who think they can cook are usually disasters waiting to happen, Sophie observes. But there's something in her voice that suggests she doesn't entirely believe her own warning. Though anyone who can appreciate your Wagyu technique probably knows his way around a kitchen. Vanessa folds the letter carefully, sliding it back into the envelope. The smart thing would be to decline politely, to stay in her lane, to build her reputation slowly and safely. The smart thing would be to avoid getting entangled with a man whose world operates by rules she's still learning, whose enemies could destroy her career with a few well-placed phone calls. But smart has never gotten her anywhere. Risk has. I'm going, she says, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Sophie nods as if she expected this answer. Then go with your eyes open, she advises. Lee Min-jun might be different from his father, but he's still a Lee. And in Seoul, that name carries weight that can either lift you up or crush you completely. What do you do when opportunity comes wrapped in complications you can't yet see? The address Min-jun provided leads to a penthouse in Hanam-dong that overlooks the Han River like a throne surveying its kingdom. Vanessa stands in the lobby of the building, her reflection multiplied infinitely in the mirror-polished marble walls, second-guessing every choice from her outfit to her decision to come here at all. She's chosen carefully, a black dress that's professional but not severe, elegant but not trying too hard, expensive enough to belong in this environment, but not so expensive that it screams desperation. Her hair is pulled back in a low chignon that showcases her neck and the delicate gold necklace that was her graduation gift to herself when she finished culinary school. The private elevator opens directly into Min-jun's apartment, and Vanessa steps into a space that manages to be both opulent and surprisingly warm. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcase Seoul's skyline, while the interior design speaks of old money confidence, understated colors, museum-quality art, furniture that costs more than most people's cars, but doesn't feel the need to announce it. Min-jun emerges from what must be the kitchen, wearing dark jeans and a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, an apron tied around his waist that's already stained with evidence of actual cooking. He looks normal, approachable, like someone who might shop for his own groceries and know how to change a tire. "You came," he says, and there's relief in his voice that surprises her. "You said you'd be cooking," Vanessa replies, allowing herself a small smile. "I was curious to see if Lee Group heirs actually know how to turn on a stove." His laugh is rich, genuine, completely free of the carefully modulated responses she's come to expect from Seoul's upper echelons. Fair question. Most of us don't. I had to fire 3 different chefs before I got frustrated enough to learn myself. He leads her through the apartment, past living spaces that could house entire families, toward a kitchen that looks like it stepped out of a professional restaurant supply catalog. Every surface gleams, every tool has its designated place, and the smell of garlic and ginger fills the air with promise. "Impressive," Vanessa says, running her fingers along the edge of a counter that's clearly been designed for serious cooking. Most rich men's kitchens are for show. Most rich men don't actually care about food beyond its price tag, Min-jun replies, checking something in the oven that smells like it could make angels weep. "My grandfather was different. He believed that a man who couldn't feed himself couldn't lead others." There's something in the way he mentions his grandfather, reverence mixed with loss, that tells Vanessa this is more than casual conversation. In Korean culture, she's learned, family relationships carry weight that Americans struggle to understand, and the mention of a grandfather suggests someone who shaped more than just Min-jun's cooking skills. "What are we having?" she asks, peering over his shoulder as he adjusts the flame under a pan that's producing sounds and aromas that make her stomach rumble with anticipation. "Fusion," he says, and the word carries implications beyond cuisine. Korean techniques with French influences, local ingredients prepared with international flair. The kind of food that makes people uncomfortable because it doesn't fit into their predetermined categories. The parallel isn't lost on her. Food that defies categorization, like people who don't fit neatly into societal boxes. Dangerous territory, she observes. The best territory usually is. They work together with surprising synchronization, Vanessa instinctively falling into the rhythm of professional kitchen collaboration, while Min-jun moves with the confidence of someone who's spent years perfecting his craft. He's good, not just competent, but genuinely skilled. His knife work clean and his seasoning instinctive. "Where did you really learn?" she asks, watching him plate with an artist's eye for composition. "My grandfather's house in Jeju." Minjun admits, concentrating on a delicate garnish arrangement. He insisted that understanding food was understanding people, their history, their hopes, their fears. Every dish tells a story about the person who makes it and the people who eat it. The food, when they finally sit down to eat, is extraordinary. Not just technically proficient, but soulful in a way that speaks of someone who cooks not to impress, but to communicate. The conversation flows as naturally as the wine he's paired with each course, ranging from culinary techniques to travel stories to the peculiar challenges of being a foreigner in Seoul. The hardest part isn't the language barrier, Vanessa finds herself saying, surprised by how easily she's sharing personal truths with this man she barely knows. It's the constant feeling that you have to prove your right to exist in every space you enter, that your presence is conditional on your ability to be exceptional at all times. Minjun's fork pauses halfway to his mouth. I've never had to prove my right to exist, he says quietly. It was assumed from birth, but I've spent most of my adult life trying to prove my right to choose who I become. The admission hangs in the air between them, vulnerable and honest, in a way that transforms the evening from business dinner to something neither of them has quite named yet. What do you want to become? Vanessa asks. Someone who builds rather than inherits, Minjun replies without hesitation. Someone who creates opportunities rather than just exploiting them. Someone my grandfather would be proud of, not just someone who carries his name. The sincerity in his voice does something to Vanessa's carefully maintained emotional defenses. She's spent so many years protecting herself against disappointment, against people who see her potential as either a threat or a novelty, that she's forgotten what it feels like to be seen simply as herself. When Minjun reaches across the table to refill her wine glass, their hands brush again. This time, neither of them pretends it's accidental. This time, the contact lingers, electricity crackling between them like the tension before a storm. Vanessa, he says, her name soft on his lips, and she realizes that no one has ever pronounced it quite that way before. Like something precious, something worth savoring. She should pull back. Should remember that she's here for business, that getting involved with someone from his world is a recipe for heartbreak, that the power differential between them makes anything personal a minefield of potential destruction. Instead, she leans forward, drawn by something stronger than logic or self-preservation. The kiss, when it happens, tastes like wine and possibility, and the kind of risk that changes everything. His hand finds the back of her neck, fingers tangling in her hair, while her palm presses against his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing as fast as her own. It lasts exactly long enough for both of them to forget every reason why it's a terrible idea, and ends the moment they hear the private elevator opening. They spring apart like teenagers caught by parents, Minjun standing so quickly he nearly knocks over his chair while Vanessa smooths her dress with hands that aren't quite steady. The elevator doors open to reveal a man in his late 50s, perfectly pressed suit, expression that could freeze fire, followed by two younger men in expensive suits who radiate the particular brand of menace that comes with private security training. Lee Dong-hyuk, patriarch of the Lee Empire, surveys the scene with eyes that miss nothing. The intimate dinner setting, his son's disheveled appearance, the beautiful black woman who clearly doesn't belong in his carefully constructed world. So, he says, his English heavily accented but precisely enunciated, this is the chef who's been causing such interesting conversations in Seoul society. The temperature in the room drops 20 degrees. When worlds collide, who survives the impact? Lee Dong-hyuk moves through Minjun's apartment like a conqueror surveying new territory, his presence filling the space with the kind of authority that comes from 40 years of crushing opponents and building empires. Everything about him speaks of control. from his perfectly arranged gray hair to his Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Father," Minjun says, his voice carefully neutral. But Vanessa can see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands have clenched into fists at his sides. "I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly," Dong-hyuk replies, his gaze moving between the intimate dinner setup and Vanessa, who's standing frozen beside the table like a deer caught in headlights. "Ms. Holloway, I presume?" The fact that he knows her name shouldn't surprise her. The Lee family doesn't operate on assumptions. But it still sends a chill down her spine. Men like Dong-hyuk don't learn names unless those names represent something they need to control or eliminate. "Yes, sir," Vanessa manages, falling back on the formal politeness that served as armor throughout her career. "It's an honor to meet you." Dong-hyuk's smile is sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm sure it is. Tell me, what do you know about the restaurant business in Korea?" The question is a trap wrapped in small talk. But Vanessa has been navigating hostile kitchens and skeptical investors long enough to recognize the game. "I know that it's built on respect for tradition, excellence in execution, and understanding that every dish represents the reputation of everyone involved in its creation." Interesting perspective, Dong-hyuk muses, moving to examine the remains of their dinner with the calculating gaze of someone who can assess value to the penny. "And what do you know about my son's business ventures?" "That he's building something new while honoring something old," Vanessa replies, surprised by her own boldness. "That he sees potential where others see problems." Minjun's sharp intake of breath tells her she said either exactly the right thing or exactly the wrong thing. With men like Dong-hyuk, those categories often overlap. "You're well-spoken," Dong-hyuk observes, settling into a chair with the casual confidence of someone who owns not just the building, but probably the entire block. "American education, I assume. Your parents must be proud of your achievements." The pause before achievements is deliberate, calculated to remind her that her accomplishments, while notable, pale in comparison to the generational wealth and influence surrounding her. But there's something else in the comment, a fishing expedition disguised as polite conversation. "I wouldn't know," Vanessa says, her voice steady despite the emotional landmine he's just stepped on. "I grew up in foster care. My achievements are my own." The information shifts something in the room's dynamics. Dong-hyuk's expression doesn't change, but Vanessa catches the slight tightening around his eyes, the way he reassesses her with the focus of a general, recognizing an unexpected variable in his battle plans. "Self-made," he says, and now there's genuine interest in his voice. "Admirable and rare. Most people prefer to inherit their advantages." The comment is clearly directed at Minjun, whose jaw tightens but doesn't respond to the provocation. This is obviously a long-running battle between father and son, played out in subtle verbal warfare and loaded silences. "Mr. Lee," Vanessa says, drawing Dong-hyuk's attention back to her. "If you'll excuse me, I should be going. Thank you for dinner, Minjun. I'll consider your offer." She moves toward her purse with the kind of graceful retreat that concedes the battlefield while preserving dignity. But Dong-hyuk's voice stops her. "Actually, Ms. Holloway, I'd like to make you an offer as well." Minjun takes a step forward, his voice sharp with warning. "Father." 2,000,001, Dong-hyuk continues, ignoring his son completely. "To return to America immediately. Clean break, no future contact, nothing that could be misinterpreted by the media or our business associates." The number hangs in the air like a slap. Not enough to be truly insulting, but not nearly enough to be tempting either. A calculated insult disguised as generosity. Dong-hyuk isn't trying to buy her off. He's trying to demonstrate her irrelevance. That's generous, Vanessa replies, her voice cool as winter wind. But I'm afraid I'm not for sale, at any price. Everyone has a price, Dong-hyuk counters, his smile becoming predatory. It's simply a matter of finding the right currency. Money, reputation, safety, career opportunities. There are so many ways to motivate people to make sensible decisions. The threat is delivered with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. But there's steel underneath that makes Vanessa's blood run cold. This isn't just a disapproving father. This is a man who's spent decades destroying obstacles to his will. Min-jun steps between them, his body language screaming protective fury. That's enough. Is it? Dong-hyuk asks, standing with fluid grace that belies his age. Because from where I stand, my son is making decisions that could damage everything our family has built. Personal choices that become public scandals. Business ventures that prioritize diversity over profitability. The word diversity comes out like something toxic he's trying to spit out, and Vanessa feels the familiar burn of rage that comes with being reduced to a symbol rather than a person. My choices are my own, Min-jun says, his voice deadly quiet. As are the consequences. Are they? Dong-hyuk challenges. Because last time I checked, your trust fund, your position in the company, your access to the resources you're using to play restaurateur, all of those things ultimately depend on family approval. My approval. The silence that follows is electric with barely contained violence. Vanessa can see Min-jun calculating, weighing his options, measuring the cost of defiance against the price of submission. I see, Min-jun finally says, his voice carefully controlled. And if I choose to continue making my own decisions about my business ventures and my personal life? Dong-hyuk's smile is arctic. Then you'll discover exactly how expensive independence can be. He moves toward the elevator, his security detail falling into step behind him like well-trained attack dogs. At the elevator doors, he turns back to Vanessa. Ms. Holloway, you seem like an intelligent woman. I'm sure you understand that some opportunities, no matter how attractive they initially appear, carry costs that far exceed their benefits. I trust you'll make the wise choice. The elevator doors close on his words, leaving behind a silence so heavy it feels like physical weight. Min-jun runs his hands through his hair, his carefully controlled facade finally cracking. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have had to. Don't, Vanessa interrupts, surprising them both with the steel in her voice. Don't apologize for him. And don't apologize for what just happened between us before he arrived. Min-jun looks up, hope and fear warring in his expression. What did happen? Vanessa moves toward him, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to smell his cologne mixed with the lingering aromas of the dinner they've shared. Something that's going to complicate both our lives in ways we probably can't imagine yet. Are you okay with that? He asks. Vanessa thinks about the kiss, about the way he stood up for her at Le Jardin Secret, about the threats his father just delivered with the casual confidence of someone who's never been denied anything he wanted. She thinks about her career, her dreams, the independence she's fought so hard to achieve. Ask me again in a week, she says, when we've both had time to count the cost. Yo. When love becomes warfare, are the casualties worth the victory? The scandal breaks on a Tuesday morning at precisely 6:47 a.m., delivered to Seoul's breakfast tables along with coffee and traditional rice porridge. Seoul Entertainment Daily leads with a photo that captures the exact moment Min-jun took Vanessa's hand at Le Jardin Secret, complete with a headline that screams, Lee Air's foreign fascination, love or publicity stunt. By 7:15, the story has been picked up by 3 major news outlets, each adding their own speculative spin. By 8:30, Vanessa's morning commute to Myeongdong Grill is interrupted by photographers who've somehow learned her routine, their cameras clicking like mechanical insects as they shout questions in a mixture of Korean and broken English. Ms. Holloway, are you dating Lee Min-jun? Is it true you're being paid to accompany him to events? What do you say to critics who claim this is just a diversity publicity stunt? Vanessa keeps her head down, her stride steady, but inside she's calculating escape routes and wondering how quickly her carefully constructed life can implode. The photographers follow her to the restaurant's entrance, where Sophie is waiting with an expression that could melt steel. Inside. Now, Sophie orders, creating a human barrier between Vanessa and the cameras with the fierce protectiveness of someone who's fought similar battles. The restaurant door closes behind them with a sound like a vault ceiling. How bad? Vanessa asks, pulling off her jacket with hands that are steadier than she feels. Sophie hands her a tablet loaded with news sites, social media feeds, and comment sections that read like a battlefield between Min-jun's defenders and his critics. The coverage ranges from cautiously supportive to openly hostile, with the disturbing undercurrent of racial commentary disguised as cultural concern. He could have any Korean woman he wanted. Why choose a foreigner? She's obviously using him for money and citizenship opportunities. This is what happens when traditional values get corrupted by Western influences. But there are other voices too, younger ones mostly, defending the right to love whoever you choose, criticizing the media's racist undertones, pointing out that Vanessa's culinary credentials speak for themselves. The good news, Sophie says, settling beside her with coffee that could wake the dead, is that Lee Min-jun's people called this morning. They want to schedule a meeting to discuss damage control and future strategy. His people? Public relations team, legal advisors, the kind of support structure that turns scandals into strategic advantages. Sophie pauses, studying Vanessa's expression. The bad news is that his father's people also called. Vanessa's stomach drops. And they want to discuss mutual interests and shared concerns about recent media attention. Sophie's tone suggests she's quoting directly from a conversation she found deeply unpleasant. I told them you'd get back to them after consulting with your own advisors. I don't have advisors. You do now, Sophie says firmly. Because this is the kind of situation where mistakes can end careers, and I refuse to watch someone destroy you for the crime of being talented while black in soul. The bell above the restaurant door chimes, and both women look up to see Marcus Thompson pushing through the entrance, his tall frame and dark skin immediately recognizable despite the baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Marcus has been Vanessa's closest friend since their Le Cordon Bleu days, the one person in Seoul who truly understands the particular challenges of being a black chef in a homogeneous culinary landscape. Saw the news, he says without preamble, settling into the booth beside them with the easy familiarity of someone who's been family in everything but blood. Thought you might need backup. How bad is it, really? Vanessa asks, because Marcus has always been brutally honest about the realities they face. Bad, he admits, but his expression isn't defeated, but not insurmountable. The key is controlling the narrative before it controls you. He pulls out his own phone, scrolling through what appears to be a carefully curated social media strategy. I've been monitoring the conversation since the story broke. The racist comments are loud, but they're not the majority. There's genuine support out there, especially from younger demographics who see this as a broader conversation about Korea's changing identity. What do you recommend? Sophie asks, her business owner instincts fully engaged. Transparency and authenticity, Marcus replies. The worst thing you can do is hide or let other people define your story. Take control of the narrative by sharing your truth. Vanessa's phone buzzes with an incoming call from an unknown number. She considers ignoring it, but something makes her answer. Vanessa? Minjun's voice is tight with stress and what sounds like exhaustion. I'm sorry about the media circus. I should have anticipated this. Where are you? She asks, noting the echo in his voice that suggests he's calling from somewhere large and probably public. Lee Group headquarters, he admits. Emergency board meeting about recent public relations challenges. Also known as my father, trying to convince the other board members that my personal choices are affecting company stock prices. Through the restaurant window, Vanessa can see the photographers still waiting, their patients suggesting they're being paid well for surveillance duty. Are they? Stock prices? Minjun's laugh has no humor in it. Down 2% since this morning, but that's more likely related to the semiconductor shortage affecting our electronics division. My father just prefers a more personal explanation for market volatility. Minjun, Vanessa begins, but he cuts her off. I need to see you, he says urgently. Not for damage control or strategic planning or any of the corporate nonsense I'm drowning in. I need to see you because what happened between us wasn't a mistake, regardless of what the media or my father thinks. The raw honesty in his voice does something to Vanessa's carefully maintained emotional defenses. Around her, Sophie and Marcus exchange looks that suggest they're hearing only one side of a conversation that's revealing more than its participants realize. Where? She asks, making a decision that probably qualifies as either brave or stupid, possibly both. My grandfather's house in Jeju, Minjun replies without hesitation. It's private, secure, and the only place in Korea where I can think clearly. Can you get away for the weekend? Vanessa looks around the restaurant that's become her sanctuary, at the friends who've become her chosen family, at the photographers outside who represent a world that will dissect every choice she makes from this moment forward. I'll be there, she says, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. After she hangs up, Marcus and Sophie are both staring at her with expressions that blend concern, admiration, and the kind of fear that comes with watching someone you care about jump off a cliff. Jeju Island? Sophie asks. For the weekend, Vanessa confirms. Marcus shakes his head slowly. Girl, you're either about to have the most romantic weekend of your life, or you're walking straight into the kind of trap that makes international news. Maybe both, Vanessa admits, but she's already mentally packing. Sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the only honest one. Jeju Island emerges from the sea like an emerald jewel, its volcanic landscape softened by the autumn mist that clings to the mountains like silk scarves. Minjun's grandfather's house sits on a cliff overlooking the ocean, a traditional Korean structure that's been modernized with glass walls and contemporary fixtures, while maintaining its connection to centuries of architectural heritage. Vanessa arrives by private car, Minjun's attempt to avoid the media circus that would inevitably follow commercial transportation, and finds him waiting on the house's wraparound porch, looking more relaxed than she's ever seen him. He's wearing jeans and a simple black sweater, his usually perfect hair slightly tousled by the ocean breeze, and when he smiles at her approach, it reaches his eyes in a way that makes her chest tighten with something dangerously close to affection. You made it, he says, taking her overnight bag with the easy courtesy that suggests good manners bred into bone and muscle. Your directions were very thorough, she replies, following him into a house that manages to feel both spacious and intimate. The interior design reflects a sophisticated understanding of traditional Korean aesthetics, clean lines, natural materials, carefully chosen art pieces that speak of generations of collected beauty. My grandfather believed that a home should reflect the soul of its inhabitants, Minjun explains, leading her through rooms that feel more like museum exhibits than living spaces. Every piece here was chosen for meaning, not just appearance. They stop before a portrait of an elderly man, whose eyes hold the same intensity as Minjun's, dressed in traditional Korean clothing, but with a bearing that suggests someone who commanded respect through achievement rather than inheritance. Below the portrait, a glass case displays military medals, business awards, and what appears to be an old chef's knife. "He cooked?" Vanessa asks, studying the knife with professional interest. "During the war, after the war, whenever life required him to create something from nothing," Minjun replies, his voice soft with memory. "He said that a man who could feed people could lead them, because both required understanding what people truly needed versus what they thought they wanted." The philosophy resonates with Vanessa's own understanding of hospitality and leadership, the way great chefs learn to read their guests' unspoken desires and deliver experiences that exceed expectations. "Smart man. He would have liked you," Minjun says, and the certainty in his voice suggests this is more than polite conversation. He respected people who created their own paths, rather than following predetermined routes. They spend the afternoon exploring the house and its gardens, talking about everything from culinary techniques to travel dreams, to the peculiar pressure of living up to other people's expectations. The conversation flows with the natural rhythm of people discovering compatibility, punctuated by comfortable silences and moments of laughter that feel precious in their spontaneity. As evening approaches, Minjun leads her to a kitchen that's clearly the house's heart, a space that combines traditional Korean cooking methods with modern equipment, designed for someone who takes food seriously. The centerpiece is a custom teppanyaki grill that's been built into a dining counter, creating an intimate cooking and eating environment. "I thought we could recreate our first meeting," Minjun says, pulling ingredients from a refrigerator that's been stocked with enough supplies to feed a small army. "Except this time, no audience, no pressure, just us and the food." "You trust me with your grandfather's kitchen?" Vanessa asks, running her fingers along the grill's surface, which has been seasoned to perfection through years of use. "I trust you with much more than that," Minjun replies, and the intensity in his voice makes her look up from the ingredients she's been examining. They cook together with the synchronized rhythm they discovered at his apartment. But here, in this private space surrounded by family history, their collaboration feels deeper, more meaningful. Vanessa finds herself sharing stories about her own culinary education, the mentors who shaped her technique, the failures that taught her resilience. "The hardest part about being a black chef," she says, her knife work maintaining its precise rhythm as she talks, "isn't the technical challenges or even the overt racism. It's the constant burden of representation. Every dish I make, every mistake I avoid or don't avoid, becomes a statement about the capabilities of people who look like me." Minjun pauses in his preparation of banchan, the small side dishes that accompany Korean meals. "I've never experienced that particular pressure," he admits, "but I understand the weight of having every personal choice interpreted as a referendum on your entire identity. Being a Lee means that my business decisions, my relationships, even my hobbies become public discussion topics. The difference," Vanessa points out, flipping vegetables on the grill with movements that have become muscle memory, "is that your identity comes with power. Mine comes with scrutiny." The observation hangs in the air between them, honest and uncomfortable in the way that real conversations about race and privilege always are. Minjun doesn't immediately respond, and Vanessa braces herself for the defensive reaction she's learned to expect when white, or in this case Asian, people are confronted with the realities of their advantages. Instead, he sets down his knife and turns to face her fully. "You're right," he says simply, "and I'm sorry that I can't change that reality, but I can promise that I'll never add to that burden." The sincerity in his voice, the way he meets her eyes without flinching from the uncomfortable truth, does something to Vanessa's carefully maintained emotional walls. She spent so many years protecting herself against disappointment that she's forgotten what it feels like to be seen and heard, without having to fight for both. Dinner, when they finally sit down to eat, is extraordinary. Not just because of the food, though every dish reflects their combined skills and shared understanding of flavor, but because of the conversation that accompanies it. They talk about ambitions and fears, about the responsibility that comes with talent, about the courage required to disappoint other people in service of being true to yourself. "What scares you most?" Minjun asks as they share a dessert he's prepared with the kind of technical precision that would impress pastry chefs. Vanessa considers the question, swirling the wine in her glass as she formulates an answer that's both honest and complete. "That I'll spend so much energy proving I belong, that I'll forget to enjoy what I've achieved. That I'll let other people's limitations become my own." "And what excites you most?" "The same thing," she admits with a laugh that's part rueful, part hopeful. "The possibility that I can build something that matters, that lasts, that opens doors for other people who've been told they don't belong." Minjun reaches across the table, covering her hand with his own. The gesture is simple, but in the context of everything they've shared, the vulnerability, the honesty, the growing recognition of something deeper than attraction, it feels monumentous. "I want to help you build that," he says, his voice steady with certainty. "Not as a benefactor or a savior or someone trying to buy your affection, but as someone who believes in what you're capable of creating." "Even if it costs you?" Vanessa asks, thinking of his father's threats, the media scrutiny, the board meetings where his personal choices become corporate liabilities. "Especially then," Minjun replies. And when he leans across the table to kiss her, it tastes like promise and possibility, and the kind of risk that transforms everything. This time, when their lips meet, there's no interruption, no external pressure, just the ocean breeze through open windows and the recognition that some choices, once made, can't be unmade. What happens when love becomes the most honest thing in a life full of expectations? Seoul greets their return with chaos. The media attention has metastasized during their weekend absence, spreading from entertainment gossip to business news to international coverage of Korea's changing social dynamics. Vanessa's photo appears on magazine covers alongside speculation about Minjun's intentions, their relationship timeline, and the Lee family's response to what pundits are calling the most scandalous romance since corporate Korea entered the modern era. But the real explosion comes Tuesday morning, when Minjun calls an impromptu press conference at Lee Group headquarters. Vanessa watches from Sophie's restaurant, surrounded by staff and customers who've gathered around the television like spectators at a gladiator match. Minjun appears on screen in a perfectly tailored navy suit, standing behind a podium bearing the Lee Group logo, flanked by lawyers and advisors who look like they'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Good morning," he begins, his voice carrying the authority that comes with genetic privilege and expensive education. "I've called this press conference to address recent media speculation about my personal life and its relationship to Lee Group business interests." The camera pans across a room full of reporters whose expressions range from professional interest to predatory anticipation. These are people who've built careers on the kind of scandals that destroy reputations, and they sense blood in the water. "First, I want to confirm that I am indeed in a relationship with Chef Vanessa Holloway, a remarkably talented culinary professional whose skills and character I deeply admire." Minjun's eyes find the camera as if he's speaking directly to Vanessa. Any suggestion that this relationship is anything other than genuine affection between two adults is both insulting and incorrect. A reporter's hand shoots up immediately. Mr. Lee, how do you respond to criticism that this relationship represents a rejection of traditional Korean values? Min Jun's smile is sharp enough to cut glass. I respond by pointing out that my grandfather, Lee Jung-ho, built this company on the principle that excellence recognizes no boundaries, geographic, cultural, or otherwise. He hired the best people regardless of their backgrounds because he understood that diversity of experience creates strength, not weakness. Another reporter jumps in. What about concerns that your father and the board of directors disapprove of your personal choices? Which brings me to the main purpose of this press conference, Min Jun says, and something in his tone makes Vanessa's stomach drop like a stone. Effective immediately, I am resigning from all positions within Lee Group and renouncing my inheritance rights to focus on building my own business ventures. The room erupts. Reporters shout questions over each other. Cameras flash like strobing lightning, and Vanessa feels the world tilt sideways as the implications of Min Jun's announcement hit her like physical blows. He's sacrificing everything. For her. For them. This decision. Min Jun continues, his voice cutting through the chaos with practiced authority, reflects my belief that personal integrity and professional independence are more valuable than inherited privilege. I will be launching Horizon Ventures as a completely independent entity, focused on hospitality and culinary innovation. Mr. Lee, a reporter near the front row manages to break through the noise. Are you doing this because of pressure from your father regarding your relationship? Min Jun's pause is barely perceptible, but Vanessa catches it, along with the slight tightening around his eyes that suggests the question has found its mark. I'm doing this because I believe in building something of my own, with people I choose, pursuing values I support. The press conference continues for another 20 minutes, but Vanessa stops hearing the questions, stops processing the implications. All she can focus on is the recognition that Min Jun has just committed financial suicide for the sake of their relationship, and she never asked him to make that sacrifice. Her phone buzzes with a text from Marcus. Holy shit. Did you know he was going to do this? She types back. No. Another text, this one from an unknown number. We need to talk. Today. DH. Dong-hyuk. Min Jun's father wants a meeting, and Vanessa doesn't need a crystal ball to predict that conversation will be anything but pleasant. Sophie appears at her elbow, expression grim. You need to see him before you make any decisions about anything else. Min Jun? His father, Sophie corrects. Because whatever he's planning to say to you, you need to hear it from him directly, rather than through intermediaries or media speculation. Vanessa looks around the restaurant, at the faces of people who've supported her dreams, who've become her chosen family in a foreign country. What if meeting with him makes everything worse? What if not meeting with him means you never understand what you're really up against? The logic is sound, even if the prospect is terrifying. Vanessa pulls out her phone and responds to Dong-hyuk's text. When and where? The response comes immediately. 1 hour. Lee Group headquarters. Ask for the executive boardroom. An hour later, Vanessa stands in the Lee Group building's marble lobby, feeling like Daniel approaching the lion's den. The building itself is a monument to corporate power. 30 floors of glass and steel reaching toward the sky like a modern Tower of Babel, filled with people whose decisions affect economies and governments. The executive boardroom occupies a corner of the 28th floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Seoul that makes the city look like a scale model of itself. Dong-hyuk sits at the head of a conference table that could accommodate 20 people, but today it's just him, a pot of tea, and an atmosphere thick enough to cut with a knife. Ms. Holloway, he says, gesturing to a chair that places her directly across from him. Thank you for coming. Mr. Lee, she replies, settling into the chair with the kind of careful composure that served her well in hostile kitchens and skeptical dining rooms. Dong-hyuk pours tea with movements that speak of ceremonies performed thousands of times, each gesture precise and loaded with meaning. I assume you watched my son's press conference this morning. I did. And what was your reaction? The question is a trap, but Vanessa can't see its exact shape yet. Surprise, she answers honestly. I had no idea he was planning something so drastic. Drastic, Dong-hyuk repeats, tasting the word like wine he's trying to identify. An interesting choice of words. Tell me, do you understand what my son just sacrificed? His inheritance, his position in the company, his financial security. Approximately $4 billion, Dong-hyuk clarifies, his voice carrying the weight of numbers that most people can't even conceptualize. Plus political connections that took 3 generations to build, social standing that opens doors throughout Asia, and business relationships that would have guaranteed his success in any venture he chose to pursue. The numbers hit Vanessa like physical blows. She knew Min-jun was wealthy, but $4 billion represents a level of generational wealth that transforms families into dynasties, individuals into institutions. Why are you telling me this? She asks. Dong-hyuk's smile is arctic. Because I want you to understand exactly what you've cost my family. And more importantly, what you stand to cost my son when this romantic fantasy inevitably ends. You seem very certain it will end? Ms. Holloway? Dong-hyuk leans forward, his voice dropping to the tone of someone sharing confidential information. I've spent 40 years building and maintaining a business empire. I understand market forces, human psychology, and the predictable patterns of behavior that govern both personal and professional relationships. He slides a tablet across the table toward her, its screen displaying what appears to be a comprehensive background report, her credit history, employment records, academic transcripts, even her juvenile records from foster care. You are a talented chef with legitimate professional credentials and admirable personal resilience, he continues as she scrolls through information about herself that she's never shared with anyone. But you are also someone whose entire life has been shaped by financial instability and social marginalization. The psychological pressure of being responsible for my son's financial ruin will destroy whatever feelings you currently believe you have for each other. Vanessa sets the tablet down carefully, fighting the urge to throw it against the nearest wall. You had me investigated. I have everyone investigated who comes into contact with my family. It's called due diligence. Dong-hyuk reclaims the tablet, closing it with a decisive snap. The question is what we do with this information. Which brings us to your offer, I assume. 50 million won, he says without preamble. Clean break, non-disclosure agreement, and letters of recommendation that will open doors at restaurants throughout Europe and North America. You can build the culinary career you've always wanted, free from the media scrutiny and social complications that will inevitably accompany any long-term relationship with my son. The offer is substantial. Enough money to launch her own restaurant anywhere in the world. Enough to buy the independence she's fought for her entire adult life. It's also an insult disguised as generosity. A reminder that no matter what she achieves, men like Dong-hyuk will always see her as a problem to be solved, rather than a person to be respected. And if I refuse, Dong-hyuk's expression doesn't change, but something cold flickers in his eyes. Then you'll discover that Seoul can be a very difficult city for foreign chefs who find themselves on the wrong side of influential families. Visa complications, health department inspections, suppliers who suddenly can't fulfill contracts. There are so many ways for promising careers to encounter unexpected obstacles. The threat is delivered with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. But there's steel underneath that makes Vanessa's blood run cold. This isn't just a disapproving father. This is a man who spent decades systematically destroying obstacles to his will. "You're threatening my career," she says, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. "I'm offering you an opportunity to preserve it," Dong-hyuk corrects smoothly. Min-jun's romantic impulses will fade, as they always do. But the damage to both your reputations, the media scrutiny, the social pressure, those consequences will linger long after the passion burns out. I'm simply providing you with an exit strategy that protects everyone involved. Vanessa stands, her movement sharp with controlled fury. "Mr. Lee, I appreciate your concern for my career prospects, but I'm afraid you've misunderstood something fundamental about who I am. Which is? I don't run from challenges. I rise to meet them." She moves toward the door, then pauses, turning back to face him. "And I certainly don't negotiate my personal relationships with men who think love is a transaction they can influence with money and threats." Dong-hyuk's mask slips for just a moment, revealing something that might be surprise or might be grudging respect. "You're making a mistake, Ms. Holloway, one that will cost you more than you can imagine." "Maybe," Vanessa replies, her hand on the door handle. "But it will be my mistake to make. When integrity becomes rebellion, what price are you willing to pay for authenticity?" The storm hits Seoul like divine retribution, turning the city's neon-lit streets into rivers of reflected light, while thunder shakes the windows of Min-jun's apartment. Vanessa arrives soaked despite the taxi ride from Lee Group headquarters, her clothes clinging to her skin and her carefully styled hair hanging in wet strands around her face. Min-jun opens the door before she can knock, as if he's been watching for her approach. His expression shifts from relief to concern as he takes in her appearance. Not just the physical evidence of the storm, but the emotional aftermath of whatever conversation has left her looking like she's been through a war. "What happened?" he asks, pulling her inside and immediately wrapping her in a towel that smells like his cologne and expensive laundry detergent. "Your father," she says simply, and Min-jun's jaw tightens with understanding. "What did he offer you?" The question tells Vanessa that Min-jun knows his father well enough to predict the conversation's general shape, if not its specific details. 50 million won and a clean exit from Korea. Min-jun runs his hands through his hair. A gesture she's learning means he's processing information that makes him simultaneously angry and unsurprised. "And when you refused?" "He made it clear that my career prospects in Seoul could become complicated if I continue to make choices he disapproves of." Vanessa accepts the cup of coffee he hands her, warming her fingers around the ceramic mug while she studies his expression. "The question is, why aren't you surprised by any of this?" Min-jun settles beside her on the couch, close enough that she can feel the heat radiating from his body, but careful not to crowd her while she's clearly processing trauma. "Because I've watched him destroy obstacles to his plans my entire life. Business competitors, political opponents, family members who disagree with his vision. My father approaches every challenge as a problem to be solved through strategic application of pressure." Family members? "My cousin Jin-ho wanted to start his own tech company instead of working for Lee Group," Min-jun explains, his voice flat with old pain. "Within 6 months, his investors backed out, his suppliers canceled contracts, and his girlfriend's family suddenly decided she should study abroad. He eventually came back to work for the company, but he's never been the same." The story hits Vanessa like cold water, clarifying the stakes in a way that makes her earlier defiance feel simultaneously brave and naive. "And you think he'll do the same thing to me?" "I think he'll try," Min-jun says honestly. "But I also think you're different from anyone he's tried to intimidate before." Most people in his world have something to lose: social standing, business relationships, family connections. You've built your career from scratch, which means you understand how to rebuild it if necessary. Vanessa considers this, sipping coffee that tastes like comfort and possibility. Is that why you renounced your inheritance? To level the playing field? Minjun's laugh has no humor in it. I renounced my inheritance because I realized that everything I thought I'd achieved was actually just borrowed privilege. My restaurant investments, my business connections, even my reputation, all of it was built on my father's foundation. I wanted to know who I am when I'm not carrying the Lee family name. And who are you? The question hangs in the air between them, loaded with implications that go far beyond their romantic relationship. Minjun sets down his coffee cup and turns to face her fully, his expression serious in a way that makes her breath catch. I'm someone who believes that love should be based on choice, not convenience. Someone who thinks that building something meaningful is more important than inheriting something impressive. Someone who wants to wake up every morning knowing that the person beside me chose to be there because of who I am, not what I represent. The honesty in his voice does something to Vanessa's carefully maintained emotional defenses. She's spent so many years protecting herself against disappointment that she's forgotten what it feels like to be seen and chosen for exactly who she is, complications and all. Minjun, she begins, then stops, struggling to find words for emotions that feel too large for language. You don't have to say anything, he says quickly. I know this is overwhelming. I know that everything I've done, the press conference, the renunciation, standing up to my father, probably feels like too much, too fast. But I need you to understand that I'm not making these choices because I think you need rescuing. I'm making them because you've shown me what it looks like to be brave enough to build a life on your own terms. Thunder crashes outside, shaking the building's foundation and temporarily drowning out the sound of Vanessa's heartbeat in her own ears. When the noise fades, she realizes that Minjun is watching her with the patient intensity of someone willing to wait for whatever answer she's prepared to give. I'm scared, she admits, the words coming out barely above a whisper. Of me? Of this? Of caring about someone whose world operates by rules I don't understand. Of letting myself believe that we can make this work when everything around us is designed to tear it apart. Minjun reaches for her hands, his fingers intertwining with hers, in a gesture that's both intimate and grounding. I'm scared too, but I've learned that the things worth having are usually the things that scare us most. What if your father succeeds in destroying my career? What if the media attention makes it impossible for me to work anywhere in Seoul? What if... Then we'll figure it out together, Minjun interrupts gently. And if Seoul doesn't work out, there are restaurants in Paris, New York, Tokyo. You're talented enough to succeed anywhere, and I'm liquid enough to support us while you rebuild. The offer is generous, practical, and exactly the kind of thing that Vanessa's independence-obsessed psyche should reject immediately. Instead, she finds herself considering what it might mean to have a true partner, someone who sees her dreams as shared goals rather than competing priorities. I don't want you to support me financially, she says carefully. I need to know that I'm succeeding because of my own abilities, not because of your resources. Then we'll structure everything transparently. Business loans instead of gifts, contracts instead of handouts, partnerships instead of dependencies. Minjun's voice is steady with certainty. Whatever it takes for you to feel like your achievements are your own. Another crash of thunder punctuates his words, but this time the sound feels less ominous and more like the universe clearing space for new possibilities. There's something else, Vanessa says, making a decision that feels both terrifying and inevitable. If we're going to do this, really do this, then we need to be completely honest with each other. About everything. What do you mean? I mean that I need to tell you about the investigation your father conducted. About my childhood, my financial history, the mistakes I've made that he's probably planning to use against us. Vanessa takes a deep breath, steeling herself for the kind of vulnerability that either destroys relationships or makes them unbreakable. And you need to tell me what else you're hiding about your family, your business, and what we're really up against. Minjun's expression shifts, becoming more serious than she's ever seen him. That's a conversation that could take all night. Good thing we've got time, Vanessa replies, settling more comfortably into the couch and preparing for the kind of honesty that changes everything. Outside, the storm continues to rage, but inside Minjun's apartment, two people begin the delicate work of building something real from the wreckage of their carefully constructed defenses. Sometimes the most dangerous storms clear the air for the most honest conversations. If you're invested in Vanessa and Minjun's fight against prejudice and power, subscribe to follow their journey as they build love strong enough to survive family empires and media storms. 3 weeks after their storm night confessions, Vanessa finds herself in the kitchen of the Shilla Hotel, preparing for the most important event of her culinary career. The Seoul International Food and Wine Festival's charity gala represents everything she's worked toward, an opportunity to showcase her skills before the city's most influential food critics, restaurateurs, and cultural tastemakers. The invitation came through Horizon Ventures, Minjun's newly independent company, which is sponsoring a table and featuring Vanessa as the evening's guest chef. It's a strategic move designed to establish both their professional credibilities while demonstrating that their relationship enhances rather than distracts from their respective talents. 30 minutes to service, Marcus calls out, his voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the professional kitchen, where Vanessa has spent the last 8 hours preparing a menu that represents her culinary philosophy. Fusion cuisine that respects traditional techniques while pushing creative boundaries. She wipes sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, surveying the mise en place that represents months of planning and preparation. Everything is perfect. The Wagyu beef aged to ideal tenderness, the banchan prepared with techniques learned from Korean grandmothers, the French sauces that will bridge Eastern and Western palates with sophisticated grace. "You've got this," Sophie says, appearing at her elbow with the kind of calm confidence that suggests she's managed similar high-stakes events. The menu is flawless, the execution is perfect, and everyone who matters is going to remember tonight as the moment Seoul discovered its next culinary star. Through the kitchen service window, Vanessa can see the ballroom filling with guests whose names regularly appear in business magazines and society pages. Minjun sits at table 12, wearing a tuxedo that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent, but his attention isn't on the networking opportunities surrounding him. Instead, he's watching the kitchen doors with the focused intensity of someone whose personal investment in the evening's success goes far beyond business considerations. "First course out in 5 minutes," Vanessa announces, her voice carrying the authority that comes from years of managing professional kitchens under pressure. Her team responds with synchronized efficiency, each person executing their role with the precision of a well-rehearsed orchestra. The amuse-bouche, Korean-spiced foie gras with pear kimchi and microgreens, leaves the kitchen in perfect formation, each plate identical in its artistic presentation. Through the service window, Vanessa watches guests' expressions shift from polite expectation to genuine surprise and appreciation as they taste combinations they've never experienced before. Table 4 wants to know if the chef is available for a brief introduction, their server reports back, and Vanessa recognizes the request as coming from Park Jin-young, the food critic whose reviews can launch or destroy culinary careers throughout Seoul. "After the main course," she responds, focusing on the beef preparation that represents the evening's centerpiece. Wagyu prepared with Korean barbecue techniques, but finished with French precision and plated with artistic elements that tell a story about cultural fusion and culinary evolution. But as the main courses leave the kitchen, something feels wrong. The smell isn't quite right. There's an undertone that doesn't belong, a slightly acrid note that makes Vanessa's professionally trained nose twitch with concern. "Marcus," she calls out, grabbing a spoon to taste the sauce that accompanies the beef. The flavor hits her palate like a physical blow. Salt levels that are completely wrong. An overwhelming brininess that would make the dish inedible. "The salt containers," Marcus says, his voice tight with understanding as he checks the mise-en-place stations. "Someone switched them. What we thought was regular salt is actually Korean sea salt. Triple the sodium content." Vanessa's heart stops as she realizes the implications. 40 plates of their signature dish, ruined by sabotage that's subtle enough to look like chef error rather than deliberate interference. In a room full of food critics and industry professionals, this kind of mistake could end careers. "How long until service?" she asks, her mind already calculating possibilities for recovery. "Servers are presenting table 1 now," Sophie reports, her face pale with the recognition of impending disaster. "Call them back," Vanessa orders, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Tell the servers there's a presentation issue and we need 30 seconds to adjust the plates." "What are you going to do?" Marcus asks, but he's already moving to intercept servers before they can distribute the sabotaged dishes. "Fix it," Vanessa replies, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she begins deconstructing the plates. "The beef is perfect. The problem is only the sauce. We rebuild with the backup sauce I prepared this morning." The next 20 minutes unfold like a high-stakes surgical procedure. Vanessa and her team work with the kind of synchronized precision that comes from years of handling kitchen emergencies, deconstructing 40 plates, removing contaminated elements, and rebuilding the presentation with backup components. "Chef Holloway," Park Jin-young's voice cuts through the kitchen noise as he approaches the service window, his expression unreadable. "I understand there was some kind of service delay?" Vanessa looks up from the final plate she's adjusting, wiping her hands on her chef's coat before approaching the critic whose opinion could make or break her sole career. "A minor presentation issue that we've resolved. Sometimes perfectionism requires an extra moment." Park Jin-young's eyes are shrewd, suggesting he understands more about kitchen dynamics than his formal manner indicates. "And the quality of the final product?" "Judge for yourself," Vanessa replies, gesturing toward the plates that are now leaving the kitchen in their corrected form. 20 minutes later, as Vanessa finally allows herself to breathe, the same server returns with a message that makes her knees weak with relief. "Table 4. Mr. Park says it's the best fusion cuisine he's experienced in Seoul. He wants to schedule an interview for his magazine." But the victory feels hollow as Vanessa considers the implications of the evening's sabotage. Someone with access to their prep kitchen deliberately compromised their most important service, and the list of people with both motive and opportunity is uncomfortably short. "Did you check the security cameras?" Minjun asks when she finally makes it to table 12 during the post-dinner reception. "Already handled," Vanessa replies, accepting the champagne he offers with hands that are steadier than she feels. "Sophie's reviewing footage with hotel security right now." "And?" "We'll know soon enough." Vanessa looks around the room, where guests are circulating with the satisfied expressions that come from experiencing something genuinely exceptional. But whoever did this knew exactly how to make maximum impact while maintaining plausible deniability. Minjun's expression darkens with understanding. Someone who understands both professional kitchens and psychological warfare. Before Vanessa can respond, Sophie appears at their table, her expression grim. "We need to talk. Privately." They find a quiet corner of the hotel lobby. far enough from the gala reception to speak freely, but close enough to maintain appearances. The security footage shows someone entering the prep kitchen at 3 a.m. this morning, Sophie reports, her voice low but clear. Female, approximately 35 years old, dark hair, familiar with the layout. She knew exactly where to find your mise en place stations. Do we have a clear image? Minjun asks. Sophie hands him a printed screenshot from the security footage, and Vanessa feels her world tilt sideways as she recognizes the face staring back at her. Chef Kim Yoona, the woman who trained her during her first months in Seoul, who provided letters of recommendation, who Vanessa trusted with techniques and recipes that represent years of culinary development. She's been feeding information to your father, Vanessa says, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. Someone's been paying her to sabotage my career from the inside. Minjun's expression shifts from surprise to cold fury. We need proof. We have proof, Sophie replies, pulling up additional screenshots on her phone. Hotel records show she was paid for culinary consulting services by a company that traces back to Lee Group subsidiaries. She's been on your father's payroll for months. The betrayal hits Vanessa like physical violence. Kim Yoona wasn't just a colleague. She was someone Vanessa trusted with her dreams, her techniques, her vulnerable moments of doubt about succeeding in Korean culinary culture. What do we do now? She asks, surprised by how steady her voice sounds, despite the rage building in her chest. Minjun's smile is sharp enough to cut glass. Now we stop playing defense and start playing offense. When betrayal comes from those closest to you, how do you rebuild trust in a world full of hidden enemies? The morning after the gala brings Seoul's food critics unanimous in their praise. Park Jin-young's review in Culinary Seoul describes Vanessa's menu as a masterpiece of cultural fusion that represents the future of Korean dining, while 3 other major publications feature her photograph alongside articles about the international chef who's redefining Seoul's culinary landscape. But the professional victory feels hollow as Vanessa sits in Minjun's apartment, surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy that goes far beyond simple family disapproval. The documents spread across his dining table tell a story of systematic sabotage that makes her earlier encounters with discrimination look like minor inconveniences. Kim Yoona received monthly payments of 5 million won for cultural consulting services. Minjun reads from a financial report his private investigators compiled overnight. But the real payments came through restaurant equipment suppliers who were instructed to delay deliveries, health inspectors who were encouraged to find violations, and media contacts who were fed negative stories about foreign chefs taking opportunities from Korean professionals. Marcus, who's been silent while reviewing the evidence, finally speaks up. This isn't just about you, Vanessa. This is a systematic campaign against foreign chefs throughout Seoul. Look at these other names: Giuseppe from Milano's, Chen Wei-ming from Golden Dragon, Sarah from Le Petit Bistro. All of them experienced similar problems over the past 18 months. The scope of the conspiracy hits Vanessa like cold water. This isn't personal vendetta. It's economic warfare disguised as cultural preservation. Why? She asks, though part of her already knows the answer. Because foreign chefs represent competition for established Korean restaurants, and established Korean restaurants represent significant business interests for companies like Lee Group. Sophie explains, her voice tight with anger as she reviews supplier contracts. Your father's company has investments in 12 of Seoul's most expensive Korean restaurants. International cuisine gaining popularity means decreased market share for traditional establishments. Minjun runs his hands through his hair. A gesture Vanessa has learned means he's processing information that makes him simultaneously furious and unsurprised. So, he wasn't just trying to break us up. He was using our relationship as an opportunity to eliminate what he sees as a broader economic threat. Which means that even if I left Korea tomorrow, this campaign would continue against other foreign chefs, Vanessa says, understanding finally crystallizing with painful clarity. This was never really about us. No, Minjun agrees, his voice hardening with resolve. But it's going to end with us. He stands, moving to his laptop with the kind of purposeful energy that suggests he's formulating a plan. I still have contacts throughout Seoul's business community, people who owe favors, who share information, who understand that competition creates better markets for everyone. We're going to expose this entire operation. How? Marcus asks, though his expression suggests he's already anticipating the answer. By going public with everything, Minjun replies, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he begins composing what appears to be a comprehensive media statement. Financial records, supplier contracts, testimony from affected chefs, documentation of the systematic campaign to eliminate foreign culinary professionals from Seoul's restaurant scene. That will destroy your father, Sophie observes, her tone carefully neutral. Good, Minjun says without hesitation, and the cold certainty in his voice makes Vanessa realize that his break from the Lee family involves more than just personal independence. It represents a fundamental rejection of the methods his father has used to build their empire. But even as she admires his courage, Vanessa can't ignore the practical implications of what he's proposing. Minjun, if you expose all of this, there's no going back. Your father won't just disown you. He'll try to destroy you completely. Then we'd better make sure our evidence is comprehensive enough to protect us, Minjun replies, turning to face her with an expression that combines determination with something that looks remarkably like anticipation. Because I'm tired of playing by his rules. And I think it's time Seoul understood exactly how its most respected business leader maintains his competitive advantages. The next 72 hours unfold like a carefully orchestrated military campaign. Minjun's network of contacts provides additional evidence of Lee Group's anti-competitive practices, while Marcus and Sophie coordinate with other affected chefs to document similar experiences. Vanessa finds herself at the center of a coalition that's growing beyond her original expectations. Not just foreign chefs, but Korean culinary professionals who've been pressured to participate in discriminatory practices, suppliers who've been forced to choose between ethical behavior and profitable contracts, and media professionals who've been fed stories they're now learning were deliberately misleading. This is bigger than restaurant politics, says Chef Park Sung-ho, owner of one of Gangnam's most respected establishments, during a clandestine meeting in Marcus's apartment. What Lee Dong-hyuk has been doing affects the entire industry's integrity. If we allow this kind of systematic manipulation to continue, none of us, Korean or foreign, can compete on merit alone. Are you prepared for the consequences? Vanessa asks, because she understands better than anyone how Lee Dong-hyuk responds to opposition. Chef Park's smile is grim, but determined. Ms. Holloway, I've been cooking professionally for 23 years. I've survived economic recessions, changing consumer tastes, and 3 different landlords who tried to triple my rent. I think I can handle one corrupt businessman who's forgotten that reputation has to be earned rather than purchased. The statement they released Thursday morning reads like a declaration of war disguised as a business ethics complaint. It details systematic discrimination against foreign chefs, documents financial manipulation designed to eliminate competition, and includes testimony from 17 culinary professionals who've experienced similar pressure tactics. But the real bombshell comes in the form of recorded conversations between Lee Dong-hyuk and various business associates, discussions that make clear his campaign against foreign restaurants was never about cultural preservation and everything about economic control. The Korean food industry represents $8 billion in annual revenue. his voice says through speakers in Minjun's apartment as they listen to recordings that will soon be broadcast throughout Seoul. Every dollar spent on Italian, French, or American cuisine is a dollar not supporting Korean businesses. Our job is to ensure that foreign competition remains minimal and manageable. And if they refuse to cooperate with our suggestions, another voice asks. Then they discover that Seoul can be a very challenging city for businesses that don't align with established community interests. The recording is damning, clear evidence of anti-competitive practices that violate both Korean business ethics laws and international trade agreements. When does this go public? Vanessa asks, staring at the laptop screen that shows their press release queued for distribution to every major media outlet in Seoul. Minjun checks his watch. 30 minutes. Just long enough for my father to receive an advance copy and understand exactly what's about to happen to his carefully constructed reputation. As if summoned by their conversation, Minjun's phone rings with a call from Lee Group headquarters. Are you going to answer? Vanessa asks. Minjun's smile is sharp with anticipation. Oh yes. I've been waiting my entire adult life for this conversation. When justice and revenge converge, the resulting explosion can reshape everything. And the phone call lasts exactly 7 minutes and 43 seconds. But its impact reverberates through Seoul's business community like an earthquake. Minjun puts the conversation on speaker, and Vanessa listens to Lee Dong-hyuk's voice oscillate between paternal disappointment and cold fury as he realizes the scope of his son's betrayal. You have 1 hour to retract this statement and issue a public apology. Dong-hyuk's voice cuts through the apartment's silence like a blade. After that, the consequences will be permanent and irreversible. What consequences? Minjun asks, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he's just unleashed. Your mother's medical treatments at Samsung Medical Center will be discontinued. The scholarship fund your grandfather established will be dissolved. Your cousin Jinho's position at Lee Electronics will be terminated. Every person you care about will discover exactly what it costs to support your romantic rebellion. The threats hit like physical blows, revealing the true scope of Lee Dong-hyuk's influence and his willingness to weaponize family relationships to maintain control. Vanessa feels sick as she realizes that their fight for justice has dragged innocent people into a war they never chose. You would hurt your own family to protect your business interests? Minjun asks, though the question sounds more like confirmation of something he's always suspected. I would protect my family's legacy from the destructive impulses of one ungrateful son who's allowed his personal weakness to cloud his judgment. Personal weakness? Your infatuation with that American chef represents everything wrong with your generation. The belief that individual desires matter more than family obligations. That romantic love justifies abandoning responsibilities to the people who made your success possible. Vanessa moves toward the phone, her voice cutting through the conversation with steel-edged clarity. Mr. Lee, this is Vanessa Holloway. I want you to understand something about your son's personal weakness. Silence on the other end, then. Ms. Holloway, I assume you're satisfied with the chaos you've created. I'm satisfied that Seoul's culinary community will finally understand what they've been up against, she replies, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. But I want you to know that Minjun didn't make these choices because of me. He made them because he has integrity, something you apparently never taught him. Integrity. Dong-hyuk repeats, his tone suggesting he's tasting something bitter. An expensive luxury that people in your position can afford because you have nothing substantial to lose. You're right, Vanessa says, surprising both Minjun and herself with the admission. I don't have generational wealth to protect or family legacies to preserve. But that's exactly why I can see clearly what you've spent decades convincing yourself to ignore. That power built on exploitation and maintained through intimidation isn't legacy, it's tyranny. The line goes silent for nearly 30 seconds before Dong-hyuk responds. 1 hour, Ms. Holloway. After that, you'll both discover that tyranny, as you call it, is remarkably effective at protecting what matters most. The call ends, leaving behind a silence that feels pregnant with approaching storm. He's going to follow through on those threats, Min-jun says, his voice flat with certainty. My mother's treatments, Jin-ho's job, the scholarship fund, he'll destroy all of it to prove that opposing him carries consequences. Then we protect them, Vanessa replies, her mind already working through possibilities. We make sure the story includes those threats, demonstrates exactly what kind of man uses family members as weapons. We turn his intimidation tactics into additional evidence of his corruption. That could make things worse for them in the short term. Maybe, but it's the only way to ensure they're safe in the long term. Vanessa moves to the laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she begins adding Lee Dong-hyuk's threats to their public statement. As long as he believes intimidation works, he'll keep using it. The only way to stop a bully is to expose him completely. Marcus, who's been silent throughout the phone call, finally speaks up. You realize that once this goes public, there's no neutral ground left? Everyone in Seoul will have to choose sides, support Lee Dong-hyuk's established power structure, or support your fight for ethical business practices. That kind of polarization has consequences. Good, Min-jun says, his voice hardening with resolve. I'm tired of pretending that neutrality is possible when you're watching systematic injustice. Everyone should have to choose. Sophie appears in the doorway, her expression grim. The story's been picked up by 3 international news outlets. This isn't just Seoul business news anymore. It's becoming a broader conversation about corporate ethics and competitive practices in Korean conglomerates. Through the apartment's floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul stretches out below them like a circuit board of lights and possibilities. Somewhere in that sprawl of humanity and ambition, Lee Dong-hyuk is probably making phone calls that will reshape careers and destroy relationships. But also, somewhere in that same city, foreign chefs are reading about their experiences in major newspapers, understanding for the first time that their struggles weren't personal failings, but systematic oppression. 15 minutes until publication. Min-jun announces, his voice carrying the weight of irreversible decision. Last chance to change our minds. Vanessa looks around the apartment that's become their war room, at the friends who've chosen to stand with them despite the personal risk, at the man who's sacrificed generational wealth for the principle that love shouldn't require abandoning integrity. I don't want to change my mind, she says, her voice steady with certainty. I want to finish what we started. Min-jun's smile transforms his entire face, revealing not just affection, but profound admiration for her courage. Then let's burn it all down and see what we can build from the ashes. At exactly 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon in October, their statement goes live across 17 media platforms simultaneously. Within 30 minutes, it's trending on Korean social media. Within 2 hours, it's been translated into 6 languages and picked up by international business publications. By evening, Lee Dong-hyuk's carefully constructed reputation lies in ruins, and Seoul's culinary community is engaged in the most honest conversation about discrimination and competitive ethics in its modern history. But Vanessa knows that victory in media wars doesn't guarantee victory in real life, and powerful men who've spent decades building empires don't surrender easily to public shame. The real battle is just beginning. When you declare war on an empire, make sure you're prepared to win completely, because there's no such thing as partial victory against absolute power. The emergency board meeting convenes at Lee Group headquarters exactly 18 hours after their exposé goes public, called by shareholders who've watched the company's stock price drop 12% in a single trading session. Min-jun arrives wearing the same navy suit he wore for his resignation press conference. But this time he's not accompanied by lawyers or advisors, just Vanessa, whose presence at Lee Group headquarters represents either remarkable courage or spectacular stupidity, possibly both. "You don't have to come with me," Min-jun says, as they stand in the building's marble lobby, surrounded by reporters who've been camped outside since dawn. "Yes, I do," Vanessa replies, adjusting her jacket with the kind of careful precision that suggests armor disguised as professional attire. "If we're going to finish this, we finish it together." The elevator ride to the executive floor feels like ascending to their own execution. But when the doors open, they're met not by security guards or hostile board members, but by Min-jun's grandfather's portrait hanging in the hallway outside the boardroom, Lee Jung-ho's eyes seeming to watch them with the kind of approval that transcends death. Inside the boardroom, Lee Dong-hyuk sits at the head of a table, surrounded by 12 board members, whose expressions range from concerned to furious. But the real surprise is the elderly woman sitting beside him, Park Soon-ja, Min-jun's grandmother, whose presence suggests family dynamics that go far deeper than business considerations. "Grandmother," Min-jun says, his voice softening with genuine affection despite the circumstances. "Min-jun-ah," she replies, her voice carrying the authority that comes from surviving 9 decades of Korean history, including war, occupation, and the country's transformation from agricultural society to global economic power. "And you must be Chef Holloway." Vanessa bows with the precise angle that demonstrates respect without subservience, a gesture she's practiced obsessively since arriving in Korea. "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Lee." "The honor," Park Soon-ja says, her English accented but clear, "is mine. I've been reading about your work with great interest." Lee Dong-hyuk's expression suggests he's watching a carefully planned strategy explode in real time. The presence of Min-jun's grandmother, a woman who holds significant influence over family decisions, but rarely involves herself in business matters, shifts the meeting's dynamics in ways he clearly didn't anticipate. "Shall we begin?" Chairman Kim, the board's senior independent director, asks with the kind of diplomatic neutrality that suggests he's managed similar family crises before. "Before we discuss business matters," Park Soon-ja interrupts, her voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that makes everyone in the room lean forward. "I want to tell you about my late husband's philosophy regarding competition and excellence." She stands with the fluid grace of someone who's commanded respect her entire life, moving to the portrait of Lee Jung-ho that dominates one wall of the boardroom. Jung-ho used to say that a business built on suppressing competition was a business that had forgotten how to compete on merit. He believed that Korean companies should succeed by being better, not by making others worse. Her gaze moves across the board members, lingering on each face with the intensity of someone taking inventory. What I've learned over the past 24 hours about this company's practices would have horrified him. Using intimidation and financial manipulation to eliminate foreign restaurants isn't competitive strategy. It's cowardice disguised as business acumen. The silence that follows is electric with tension. Board members exchange glances that suggest rapid recalculation of loyalties and political positions, while Lee Dong-hyuk's face cycles through expressions that reveal a man watching his carefully constructed authority structure collapse in real time. "Furthermore," Park Soon-ja continues, "I want to address the personal matter that has become public controversy." Min-jun's relationship with Chef Holloway represents exactly the kind of international partnership that Jung-ho envisioned for Korea's future. Collaborative, respectful, based on mutual recognition of excellence rather than cultural prejudice. She turns to Vanessa, her smile warm with genuine approval. My dear, I've eaten at every significant restaurant in Seoul over the past 60 years. Your fusion cuisine represents not cultural betrayal, but cultural evolution. Korea becomes stronger when it learns from the world, not when it hides from it. Grandmother, Lee Dong-hyuk's voice cuts through the room with barely controlled fury. You're allowing personal sentiment to cloud your judgment about business necessities. Am I? Park Soon-ja's tone doesn't change, but something Arctic enters her expression. Then perhaps you can explain to this board why systematic discrimination against foreign businesses represents sound economic strategy rather than illegal anti-competitive practices. She moves to the conference table's head, displacing her son with movements that suggest this transition of authority has been inevitable rather than unexpected. Because I've spent the morning with lawyers who specialize in international business law, and they've explained to me exactly what criminal charges could be filed based on the evidence that's now public record. The temperature in the room drops 20 degrees as board members realize they're not just dealing with family drama, they're facing potential criminal liability for corporate practices they may have unknowingly endorsed. Chairman Kim clears his throat diplomatically. Mrs. Lee, what would you recommend as our path forward? Complete restructuring of Lee Group's competitive practices, immediate cessation of any activities that could be construed as anti-competitive, and public commitment to supporting Seoul's diverse culinary community rather than suppressing it. Her voice is steady with certainty. Additionally, I'm recommending that Min Jun be reinstated as heir apparent, with full authority to implement ethical business practices throughout our subsidiaries. And if I refuse to accept these changes? Lee Dong-hyuk asks, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Park Soon-ja's smile is sharp enough to cut glass. Then you'll discover that family authority ultimately rests with those who built the fortune, not those who've simply managed it. I still control 42% of Lee Group stock, and I'm prepared to use that influence to ensure this company reflects the values Jung-ho died defending. The power shift is so sudden and complete that it takes several seconds for its implications to fully register. Lee Dong-hyuk, the man who spent decades terrorizing competitors and family members alike, has just been outmaneuvered by his own mother, using weapons he never saw coming. The vote, Chairman Kim announces, his voice carefully neutral, is whether to accept Mrs. Lee's recommendations for corporate restructuring and leadership transition. All in favor? 8 hands rise immediately. 3 board members abstain. Only Lee Dong-hyuk votes against the measure that effectively ends his control of the company he's led for 23 years. Motion carries, Chairman Kim says with the kind of diplomatic relief that suggests he's been waiting years for someone with enough authority to challenge Lee Dong-hyuk's methods. Min Jun, do you accept reinstatement as heir apparent under the conditions outlined by Mrs. Lee? Min Jun looks across the table at Vanessa, whose expression combines pride, love, and something that might be awe at what they've just witnessed. I accept, with the understanding that Lee Group's future success will be built on ethical competition and international collaboration rather than intimidation and suppression. Excellent, Park Soon-ja says, settling back into her chair with the satisfaction of someone who's just completed a project decades in the making. Now, Chef Holloway, I believe my grandson mentioned something about opening a restaurant that showcases fusion cuisine. Lee Group would be honored to provide whatever support you need to make that dream a reality. As they leave Lee Group headquarters an hour later, Seoul's skyline looks different somehow. Less imposing, more full of possibility. The reporters outside shout questions that seem somehow less threatening now, their cameras capturing not scandal but transformation. Your grandmother, Vanessa says as their car pulls away from the building, is absolutely terrifying. Min Jun's laugh is rich with relief and genuine affection. She's been waiting 40 years to put my father in his place. We just gave her the perfect excuse. And now? Now we build something better, he replies, taking her hand as Seoul flows past their windows like a river of light and promise. Together. Sometimes the most powerful alliances form between the most unexpected partners. 6 months later, Fusion opens its doors in Itaewon with a line of customers that wraps around 2 city blocks and a reservation list that extends 4 months into the future. The restaurant occupies a restored hanok that combines traditional Korean architecture with contemporary design elements, creating spaces that feel both rooted in history and thoroughly modern. Vanessa stands in the kitchen, her kitchen, during the pre-service prep, watching her team work with the synchronized efficiency that comes from months of training and shared commitment to excellence. The staff represents the kind of international collaboration that Seoul's culinary scene has embraced since the Lee Group scandal transformed conversations about cultural identity and competitive practices throughout Korean business. 30 covers for tonight's service, Marcus announces, his role as sous chef bringing him the kind of professional satisfaction that comes from building something meaningful from the ground up. Including Park Jin-young at table 12 and 3 international food critics who flew in specifically for the opening. The mention of Park Jin-young, the critic whose early support helped launch Vanessa's career, brings a smile to her face. 6 months ago, she was fighting for the right to cook professionally in Seoul. Tonight she's being reviewed by critics who consider her restaurant one of the most anticipated openings in Korean culinary history. Chef, calls out Jin-soo, one of the young Korean cooks who joined their team specifically to learn fusion techniques that combine traditional Korean methods with international influences. The banchan stations are ready, and the wagyu has reached perfect temperature. Vanessa moves through the kitchen with the fluid grace of someone who's found her element, tasting sauces, adjusting seasonings, inspecting presentations with the critical eye that separates good restaurants from exceptional ones. Everything about fusion represents her culinary philosophy, respect for traditional techniques combined with creative innovation that pushes boundaries without losing authenticity. Through the kitchen's pass window, she can see the dining room filling with a crowd that represents Seoul's evolving cultural landscape. Korean business leaders sit beside international diplomats. Young professionals mingle with established cultural figures, and the conversation flows in multiple languages with the easy comfort of a city that's learned to celebrate diversity rather than fear it. At table 15, Min-jun entertains a group of investors interested in expanding fusion into a chain of restaurants that could bring their cultural fusion concept to other international markets. He's wearing a navy suit that showcases his transformation from inherited privilege to earned respect. And when he catches Vanessa's eye through the service window, his smile carries the warmth of shared achievement. "First course out," Vanessa announces, and her team responds with the choreographed precision of performers who've rehearsed their roles until excellence becomes instinct. The amuse-bouche, Korean spiced scallop with kimchi foam and crispy rice, represents everything fusion stands for. Traditional Korean flavors presented through international techniques in a way that respects both cultures, while creating something entirely new. The evening unfolds with the kind of seamless perfection that makes other chefs jealous, and food critics effusive in their praise. Each course builds on the last, creating a narrative arc that tells the story of Korean cuisine's evolution while honoring its roots. The wagyu preparation that first brought Vanessa and Min-jun together appears as the evening's centerpiece, now refined through months of experimentation into something that transcends its original inspiration. But the real victory isn't in the food, though every dish earns the kind of response that launches culinary legends. The real victory is in the room itself, in the way Seoul's cultural elite has embraced a Black American chef whose presence once threatened their comfortable assumptions about who belongs in their exclusive circles. Chef Holloway, Park Jin-young appears in the kitchen doorway as the evening winds down, his expression carrying the kind of respect reserved for professionals who've exceeded already high expectations. Exceptional work tonight. This is the kind of restaurant that changes conversations about what Korean cuisine can become. Thank you, Vanessa replies, accepting the praise with the gracious confidence of someone who's learned to believe in her own worth. But this isn't just about Korean cuisine, instead of competing. Through the kitchen window, she can see Sophie raising a champagne toast with a table full of restaurant owners who once worried that foreign chefs would steal opportunities from Korean professionals. Now they're celebrating Fusion's success as proof that excellence creates opportunities rather than eliminating them. Ms. Holloway, a server approaches with a message that makes her heart skip. There's someone at table 8 who'd like to speak with you. Vanessa looks toward table 8 and feels her breath catch. Lee Dong-hyuk sits alone, wearing a simple dark suit instead of his usual power attire, his expression unreadable as he slowly sips tea that he's apparently been nursing throughout the evening service. Should I call security? Marcus asks quietly. But Vanessa shakes her head. No. It's time to finish this conversation properly. She removes her chef's coat, smooths down her hair, and approaches table 8 with the steady stride of someone who's no longer afraid of men who mistake intimidation for authority. Mr. Lee, she says, settling into the chair across from him with the kind of careful composure that acknowledges his presence without conceding his power. Ms. Holloway, he replies, his voice carrying none of the Arctic authority she remembers from their previous encounters. Congratulations on your success. The food was exceptional. The admission surprises her, both in its sincerity and its implications. Thank you. I didn't expect to see you here tonight. I wanted to understand what I'd been fighting against, Dong-hyuk says, his eyes moving around the dining room where Seoul's cultural elite continues to celebrate. What I've learned tonight is that I wasn't fighting against you. I was fighting against the future. The words hang in the air between them, loaded with implications that go far beyond their personal conflict. Vanessa realizes that she's witnessing something unprecedented. Lee Dong-hyuk admitting error, accepting defeat, acknowledging that his worldview was fundamentally flawed. The future doesn't have to be your enemy, she says carefully. It can be your opportunity to build something better than what came before. Dong-hyuk's smile is tired, but genuine. Perhaps. But that's a conversation for younger people to have. My son has shown that he understands possibilities I was never able to see. He stands, leaving money on the table that's far more than necessary for a single cup of tea. I came here tonight to apologize, Ms. Holloway, not just for what I did to you, but for what I nearly prevented Seoul from experiencing. This restaurant, your vision, represents everything I claim to value but never actually understood. Which was? Excellence without prejudice, innovation without abandoning tradition, success that lifts others rather than pushing them down. He pauses, looking around the room one final time. Min-jun chose well, not just in business partners, but in the values he decided to embrace. After he leaves, Vanessa sits alone at table 8 for several minutes, processing the encounter that feels like the closing of a chapter she'd never expected to finish. Through the restaurant's windows, Seoul sparkles with the kind of energy that comes from a city discovering new possibilities for itself. You okay? Min-jun appears beside her, his presence warm and grounding after the emotional complexity of facing his father. Better than okay, she replies, standing to survey the dining room where their shared vision has become tangible reality. We did it. We actually did it. We did. Min-jun agrees, but his expression suggests he's thinking beyond tonight's success. And this is just the beginning. Park Jin-young mentioned interest from international restaurant groups. Sophie's been approached about franchise opportunities. Marcus has investors asking about his own restaurant concept. And Minjun takes her hands, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that's become as natural as breathing. And I think we should say yes to all of it. Build something bigger than just one restaurant. Create opportunities for other chefs who've been told they don't belong. The proposal is ambitious, exciting, and exactly the kind of challenge that makes Vanessa's pulse quicken with anticipation. A restaurant empire built on inclusion rather than exclusion? A restaurant empire built on the revolutionary idea that the best food comes from the best chefs, regardless of where they were born or what they look like. As they walk through Fusion's dining room, past tables full of satisfied customers and a kitchen full of proud staff members, Vanessa realizes that vengeance, when it comes, doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like success so complete and undeniable that your enemies have no choice but to admit they were wrong. Sometimes vengeance has the sweetest name of all: vindication. When excellence becomes your weapon and success becomes your shield, no enemy can stand against the truth of what you've built. 1 year after Fusion's opening, Vanessa stands in the same spot where Lee Minjun first defended her talent. But now the context has transformed completely. Le Jardin's secret has been closed for renovations, not because of scandal or failure, but because its owners are implementing the diversity and inclusion policies that have become standard throughout Seoul's hospitality industry following the Lee Group revelations. The space has been rented for tonight's private celebration. The announcement of Fusion Seoul, Fusion Tokyo, and Fusion New York, a restaurant empire that represents the kind of international collaboration that once seemed impossible in Korean business culture. 5 minutes until service, Marcus calls out. But tonight he's not calling service for a restaurant. He's calling the announcement ceremony that will launch him as executive chef of Fusion New York and establish Vanessa as the culinary director of an international brand built on cultural fusion and professional excellence. Through the event space's windows, Seoul stretches out like a constellation of possibilities. Its skyline transformed by new restaurants, hotels, and businesses that have embraced the diversity policies that emerged from the cultural transformation following Dong-hyuk's corporate scandal. The city looks different now, more vibrant, more international, more willing to celebrate excellence regardless of its origins. "You ready for this?" Sophie asks, appearing beside Vanessa wearing a designer dress that reflects her new role as general manager of their restaurant group. The woman who once worried about taking risks on foreign chefs now oversees operations for an international culinary empire that employs over 200 people across 3 countries. "As ready as anyone can be for changing the world," Vanessa replies, adjusting the emerald green gown that Minjun chose specifically because it matches her eyes and makes her skin glow like burnished gold under the restaurant's lighting. The guest list reads like a directory of Seoul's cultural and business elite. But now these are people who celebrate diversity rather than resist it, who understand that competition creates excellence rather than threatening it. Park Jin-young sits beside 3 Michelin Guide representatives who flew in from Tokyo, specifically for tonight's announcement. Korean restaurant owners mingle with international investors, and the conversation flows in multiple languages with the easy comfort of a community that's learned to value inclusion over exclusion. At exactly 8 p.m., Minjun takes the small stage that's been erected in the space where Vanessa once faced discrimination and humiliation. He's wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo that showcases his transformation from inherited privilege to earned leadership, and when he speaks, his voice carries the authority that comes from building something meaningful rather than simply managing something inherited. 2 years ago, in the same room, I watched talented people face prejudice disguised as tradition. he begins, his eyes finding Vanessa in the audience. Tonight, we're here to celebrate what happens when a community chooses to embrace excellence over exclusion, innovation over fear, collaboration over competition. The applause that follows isn't polite social obligation. It's genuine appreciation from an audience that's witnessed Seoul's cultural transformation and understands its significance. These are people who've seen their city become more vibrant, more creative, more successful because it learned to value talent regardless of its origins. Fusion represents more than just restaurants, Minjun continues. It represents a philosophy that the best of any culture can be enhanced, rather than diminished by engagement with the best of other cultures. Our expansion into Tokyo and New York isn't just business development. It's cultural exchange that creates opportunities for chefs, servers, managers, and investors who believe that diversity creates strength. Through the audience, Vanessa can see faces that tell the story of Seoul's evolution. Lee Dong-hyuk isn't present. He spent the past year managing a much-reduced Lee group while implementing the ethical business practices his mother demanded. But his absence feels appropriate rather than hostile. This celebration isn't about defeating enemies. It's about building something better than what existed before. But tonight's real celebration, Minjun says, his voice softening in a way that makes Vanessa's heart skip, is personal as well as professional. He steps down from the stage, moving through the audience with the confidence of someone who's learned to trust his own judgment over other people's expectations. When he reaches Vanessa's table, he extends his hand in a gesture that mirrors their first meeting but carries entirely different implications. "Vanessa Holloway," he says, his voice carrying clearly through the now silent room. "You've shown me what it means to build a life based on excellence rather than inheritance, courage rather than conformity, love rather than convenience." The small velvet box he produces from his jacket pocket seems to glow under the restaurant's lighting, its contents representing not just personal commitment, but the kind of partnership that creates possibilities neither person could achieve alone. "Will you marry me?" he asks. And the words carry the weight of everything they've built together: professional success, cultural change, personal growth, and love that's survived public scrutiny, family pressure, and the kind of challenges that either destroy relationships or make them unbreakable. The ring is perfect, not ostentatious or designed to showcase wealth, but elegant in its simplicity and meaningful in its craftsmanship. A single diamond surrounded by smaller stones that catch the light and throw it back in patterns that remind Vanessa of the teppanyaki flames where they first discovered their compatibility. "Yes," she says, her voice steady despite the tears that are making Seoul's skyline blur into impressionist art. "Yes, to all of it. The restaurants, the partnership, the future we're going to build together." The applause that erupts is thunderous, but Vanessa barely hears it. She's focused on Minjun's face as he slides the ring onto her finger, on the way his eyes reflect not just personal happiness, but profound admiration for what they've accomplished together. "So," he says after the audience has quieted enough for conversation, "ready to take over the international culinary scene? With you?" Vanessa looks around the room filled with people who've supported their vision, at the city that's learned to celebrate rather than resist change, at the future that stretches ahead of them full of possibilities they're only beginning to imagine. "I'm ready for anything." The evening continues with champagne toasts and business discussions, with congratulations and planning sessions for restaurant openings in two of the world's most competitive culinary markets. But the real celebration is quieter, more personal. The recognition that love and professional excellence can enhance each other rather than competing for attention. Later, as Seoul's lights twinkle below them from the rooftop of Minjun's apartment, Vanessa realizes that their story has come full circle. From humiliation in a restaurant kitchen to engagement in that same space, from fighting for the right to cook professionally to building an international culinary empire, from love that seemed impossible to partnership that feels inevitable. "What are you thinking about?" Minjun asks, settling beside her with 2 glasses of champagne that probably cost more than most people spend on groceries, but feels perfect for this moment. "I'm thinking about that first night, when your father threatened to destroy my career if I didn't leave Korea," Vanessa says, accepting the champagne and looking out over a city that's become her home in ways she never expected. "He was so certain that I didn't belong here, that I'd never survive in Seoul's business culture. And now I'm engaged to his son, about to open restaurants in 3 countries, and Seoul's food critics call me one of the city's most influential chefs." She laughs, the sound carrying joy and amazement in equal measure. Sometimes the best revenge is simply proving people wrong by succeeding beyond their ability to imagine. Minjun raises his glass in a toast that encompasses everything they've built and everything they're planning to build. To proving people wrong. To building something better, Vanessa counters, touching her glass to his with the clear ring of crystal meeting crystal. "To us," Minjun says, his voice soft with the certainty that comes from finding someone whose dreams align with your own, whose courage inspires your own, whose love makes everything else possible. "To us," Vanessa agrees, and the words taste like promise and possibility, and the kind of future that's worth fighting for. As they sit together on the rooftop overlooking Seoul, the city's light spreading below them like scattered diamonds, Vanessa realizes that some stories don't end. They transform into new beginnings. Tomorrow will bring challenges and opportunities, successes and setbacks. The daily work of building an international business and maintaining a partnership that's both personal and professional. But tonight, with Seoul sparkling below them and their shared future stretching ahead like an endless horizon of possibilities, everything feels exactly as it should be. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies. It's building something so beautiful that their opposition becomes irrelevant. 3 years later, Seoul Culinary Magazine features Vanessa on its cover with the headline, "The Chef Who Changed Seoul: How International Fusion Created a Culinary Revolution." The article describes how her success opened doors for foreign chefs throughout Korea, how the Lee Group scandal transformed business ethics standards across multiple industries, and how Seoul's restaurant scene has become one of the world's most diverse and innovative. The Fusion Restaurant Group now operates in 12 cities across 4 continents, employing over 800 people and serving as a model for how cultural collaboration can create business success while advancing social progress. Marcus runs the New York operation, Sophie oversees European expansion, and a new generation of chefs, Korean and international, have found opportunities that wouldn't have existed without the changes Vanessa and Minjun's relationship helped catalyze. But the real measure of their impact isn't in business metrics or media coverage. It's in the young Korean-American chef who opens her first restaurant in Gangnam without facing questions about cultural authenticity, the Italian cook who learns traditional kimchi-making techniques from Korean grandmothers, the investment policies that evaluate business potential based on innovation rather than the nationality of entrepreneurs. Seoul has become a city where excellence is recognized regardless of its origins, where tradition and innovation enhance each other rather than competing for dominance, where love stories like theirs inspire possibility rather than scandal. And in a restored hanok in Itaewon, where the original fusion continues to serve the kind of meals that change minds and open hearts, Vanessa Holloway Lee stands in her kitchen, watching new chefs learn that the most revolutionary act is simply being excellent at what you do, regardless of what anyone else believes about who you are or where you belong. Sometimes changing the world starts with one perfectly prepared dish, served to the right person at exactly the right moment. Sometimes it starts with someone brave enough to defend what matters, even when the cost seems impossibly high. Sometimes it starts with love that refuses to accept other people's limitations as your own. Thank you for following Vanessa and Minjun's journey from prejudice to partnership, from struggle to success, from love that seemed impossible to love, that changed everything. Their story proves that sometimes the most powerful revolutions happen not through violence or anger, but through excellence that cannot be denied, and love that refuses to be defeated.